Hey everyone, welcome to Reddit Readout. Today we are checking out Malicious Compliance. Story 1. I crashed my mom's email server. As a teenager, whenever I did something to upset my parents, they would take my phone away for around 1 week. This later became an issue because I would have clubs, sports, and other after-school activities that required me to be picked up later, and my mom would forget when to pick me up, resulting in me walking almost 3 miles home several days. Without my phone, my parents would tell me to email them. However, me being the teenager I was, I never checked my emails for responses and would occasionally forget to send them. Anyways, one time, my parents decided I had spent way too much time on my phone and took it away. Normally, I would send my mom several texts during the day to ask about stuff and let her know my plans after school. I went to school and sent so many emails that I crashed her server, which wasn't very hard because she has like 15k unread emails. Her phone was already struggling with storage, but adding these additional 100 emails was the last straw and her phone completely crashed. Somehow when she finally got her email to work, she had lost progress on some of her favorite apps, some random reading app and a couple brain game things, and had been logged out of her social medias. Watching her try to find the passwords was well worth it. 10/10 would do again. Update: I see a lot of people talking about payphones. This was in the 2010s, we didn't have payphones. Also, I clarified this earlier in the Story 2. I'll lose my job for clocking in 1 minute late. Hate to do this. Punctuality is a good habit, it shows discipline and commitment. I worked in a warehouse where you had to clock in before your start time. There was a computerized process and you would lose your job if you clocked in late more than twice a year, even if you were only 1 minute late. Now, I pride myself on punctuality, but I was running a bit late for the 3rd time in 10 months. A man's gotta hustle, and I simply called my employer and told him that I was feeling sick and needed to take a day off. My state has paid accrued sick leave. The fallout was that I kept my job. It's been a year since, and I got paid for a full day without working. Story 3. Maelstrom. Short and simple, one of my roles in finance included responsibility for sending out daily profit/loss, P&L, reports to desk heads, traders and accounting. Trivial enough, and basically automated, the system would pull together the data and send out the messages. The firm started a new department, tasked with managing whole firm risk, and the first thing they needed was to understand the history of performance. The head of the new department called me, asked me to locate all the history I could find, and to send it to him. When I asked what form he wanted it in, he was direct, spoke sharply, and said, "I want to see exactly what was reported." I asked if he was really sure, and he said yes. Cue taken. I set a 10-year date range, put his name in the to override and hit go. The system took perhaps 20 seconds to generate 10 years worth of daily reports by desk. About a minute later, the manager called me back. "Can you make it stop?" he asked. "Sorry," I replied, "the process is complete, they are heading for your mailbox." To his credit, he laughed. "I asked for that," he said. We got on fine after that. Story 4. Tell us the right time. For many years, my family would take trips with other family members. All of these trips had one thing in common: my aunt, uncle and cousins would be late for everything. This used to really irritate my parents, who are pretty punctual and a lot more kids to organize, 4 of us, compared to my 2 cousins. By mutual agreement, any other family involved in these outings decided to go along with my parents, give aunt and uncle the wrong time. For example, if an event started at 11 a.m., they'd be told 10 a.m. This was pretty effective until aunt and uncle started realizing they were being given the wrong time. I believe other family members explained why that was, and that they were fed up with always waiting on them or being late. Self-awareness not being very apparent that they were the issue, it was decided by them that it wasn't their fault, and they told my parents, "Give us the right time from now on and you'll see, we aren't the problem." My parents, especially my ma'am, hates the idea of people missing out on something but is also prepared to let a natural consequence occur if it's not too harsh. The very next week we had a day trip booked on the ferry. This was something we did once a year, over to the UK and back in one day. Fondly known as a booze cruise back in the day due to the opportunity to purchase cheap alcohol. Kids would explore the ship, and when we docked, raid the pick and mix in Woolworths and buy confection that we couldn't get at home. It was something everyone looked forward to a lot. What can I say, it was the early 90s. With the best will in the world, the ferry waits for no man. So it was a sad day for 4 people who were told the ferry left at 8 AM sharp, the correct time, and who arrived after 8:30 to see a small, ferry-shaped speck in the distance, heading towards the UK. Sadly, it didn't make them any more punctual after that, but they were always told the correct time as requested, and if they were late, we didn't wait anymore. For months, whenever we'd see them after that, my parents used to cheerily wave and say, "Very nice to see you." Story 5. Go to the warehouse for lunch. I am a career garage door repairman. About a decade ago I was working for a particularly cheap owner. He felt that the installers and I were robbing him with the amount of hours we were working. This owner decided that the guys were taking longer lunch breaks than reported and clocking in earlier than he was willing to pay for. His solution was not the brightest. You had to clock in on time, and you had to drive from wherever you were working back to the warehouse for your hour lunch. We always started working about half an hour before clocking in, loading our trucks and organizing our days. We immediately stopped that. Our usual 45-minute lunch break, we never took the full hour, now could take up to 3 hours depending on drive time. Overtime went from roughly 2 hours a person per week to almost 8. This lasted exactly 1 pay period. We all tried to tell him, but some people just don't understand until they see it. Story 6. Do you want me to lie to you? I don't know if this is exactly MC, I think it sort of fits here. I'm a cab driver, I often work early in the morning, taking passengers to work, airport, etc. Often, early in the morning, when there is no traffic, I'll pull up to a red light at a minor intersection, look all ways, and if there are no cars visible, I'll then proceed through the intersection. My thinking is that at that time of the morning, any cars I see stand a good chance of being a police car. One morning a few years ago, I did what I described above, and in short order, had a cop behind me, pulling me over. We discussed my actions, and I asked if he'd noticed I paused for several seconds before proceeding. He said he did, and I explained what I was doing. He said it didn't make a difference, and I told him I was just being cautious about it, but saw little harm when there are no cars visible in any direction. He determined he was going to give me a warning, went back to his vehicle to do the paperwork, came back and handed me the warning. He then said to me, "You aren't going to do that anymore, are you?" I just looked at him, and he repeated himself. I said, "Do you want me to lie to you? I've been open and honest with you to this point." He just gave me a glare, and walked back to his car. Story 7. Not touch clients' websites. Sure. Keeping it vague for safety. Used to do client a favor, and I updated and fixed their clients' websites, along with creating new pages and whatnot. One of her clients complained about the design, but I had told I was doing a rush job and would need to get an actual designer to do it. Client was rude to me and threw me under the bus. Told me I was not to touch clients' websites, with client CC. Okay. I am not touching anything. Need pages created? Send it back to designing company for quote. Need stuff updated? Send it back to IT for quote. Staff asking me for help? Sorry, can't touch client property. Used to spend 30 minutes to do a task. Now, as I have to prepare documentation for the proper departments, it takes me 90 minutes to do a task. I'm just complying. Story 8. Corporate crone gets got. When I was a porter at Burger King, one of my jobs was to clean the parking lot. We had a corporate crone who would regularly drop by for inspections, and she always would give us some inane task that took forever. We always knew when she came in that we'd be having a bad day. One day I was cleaning the parking lot oil stains with some heavy-duty degreaser. I had a deck brush and a bucket and a water hose. Here comes corporate crone in her fancy Lexus. She demanded I wash her car. I told her that I had degreaser, not soap in the bucket. This was strong stuff, like eat your skin up if you don't wear gloves strong. She insisted that she was corporate, and I needed to do as she said or else she could fire me on the spot. She actually called me lazy after I'd been out there for hours scrubbing oil spots. Well, alrighty then, MRS crone. You're the boss. I gave her car a really thorough scrubbing with that degreaser, leaving no spot untouched. I saw a couple small bubbles forming in the paint. I barely rinsed it, just enough to get the suds off. Then she drove off into the sunset. The next time she came in, her paint was flaking off so bad there were huge bare patches. I had tried to warn her, but hey, she is the boss after all. I don't think she ever figured out it was the car wash that did it. She tried to trade it in, but nobody would take it. She sold it at a huge loss. Corporate headquarters was actually right down the street from the one I worked at. I saw that splotchy Lexus every day on my way home until she finally sold it. Always gave me a chuckle. Story 9. Get me another 2205 LTR drums to make up this load or you ain't going home, okie dokie then. Early days of the waste management industry was full of stupid stuff, but my first experience of management dickheadness was when my boss, H, came up to me on the Friday afternoon before my fortnight of booked holiday time and said, "How many 205 late drums of recyclable solvent do you have ready to go today?" Me, doing a quick stock check, 68, H. H, that is totally unacceptable, Nujay Danzig. To make it viable to send drums to the recycling facility we need a full load of 88 drums. Now you either find me another 20 drums quickly or you're not going anywhere this evening. I was fed up with this sort of thing getting sprung on a Friday, but this time I wasn't in the mood, so I quickly ran through all our stock and saw there was absolutely nothing else to send that was viable. Time was ticking, so I got 5 empty pallets, 20 new empty drums and proceeded to band them in place, label them for transport and then put them with the other drums ready to go. H saw me at the clocking out machine and said, "I hope you found me those drums for that load." I said sure did. It was no big thing and left with him congratulating me on a job well done when under pressure. On my return from holiday, he asked me about why the load was very light at the recycling center weighbridge, and I just said that it must have been all the neat solvent I used to create the load. That's all for today. Please don't forget to like and subscribe.